just has a lot of questions. With us now is Congressman Dave Min, a Democrat from California. He is on the House Oversight Committee. Congressman, just first off, what do you think of the arguments for getting testimony from Secretary Clinton when she says she never met Jeffrey Epstein?
First, thanks for having me on, John. Yeah, I'm a little curious as to why we called in Secretary Clinton because her name's not in the Epstein files, as far as I'm aware, not in any kind of meaningful way. Bill Clinton, I think there's a case to be made because he is in the Epstein files. And I don't know exactly what Chair Comer's agenda is. It does look partisan. And one of the points I've made is let's bring in everybody. Let's bring in Bill Clinton, but let's also bring in RFK and Elon Musk and Howard Lutnick and, yes, Donald Trump as well, because his name is all over the Epstein files. But we should be trying to seek answers from anyone whose name is in there as a notable figure, anyone who is potentially a co-conspirator. But we're only, it appears, going after Democrats right now. And I think that's why a lot of folks feel like this investigation is partisan.
What specifically do you want to know from former President Clinton?
Look, I think we want to know, like everybody in America, why were you in the Epstein files? You know, when you I think he visited the island. What was the nature of that? Why were you associating with these folks? And we want to hear good answers as to, you know, if he is actually cleared of any wrongdoing, we want to know, you know, some kind of plausible explanation as to what he was doing. But I think we deserve answers. His name is in the Epstein files. But again, I want to emphasize that every single person who is meaningfully mentioned in the Epstein files, including the current president of the United States, we should be calling them as well. And this should not just go after a handful of Donald Trump's enemies. Yeah. It should go after everyone. And I'll just say that, you know, a number of us stood in a room with the survivors, like 12 survivors, and we made a promise to them to try to get the truth, no matter who it implicated. And so if it's Democrats, if it's Republicans, I don't care. We have to go after everybody. But right now, it does appear that this committee is focused on a handful of Donald Trump's critics and enemies.
It is unprecedented for a former president to sit before Congress in a deposition like this. That happens tomorrow with Bill Clinton. I want to turn the focus to these documents that were apparently not released with the Department of Justice big release, their big release, what they called a big release of the Epstein files. 3 interviews related to a woman who told agents that Jeffrey Epstein had repeatedly abused her, starting when she was underage and about 13 years old, and that President Trump, who was then a citizen, had also sexually assaulted her. These were interviews apparently conducted in 2019. This witness said these events had happened years and years before. Just to be clear, just because a witness does say that doesn't mean it happened. But these documents weren't turned over. How satisfied are you with the Department of Justice justification of that, which is to say, oh, we've been told they're there, now we'll go look for them and maybe turn them over?
Not satisfied at all. I think at this point we are concerned, many of us, that they are obstructing justice. And I'll just point out that it's not just 3 memos. It's a number of other memos, charging memos, things like that related to that same incident. 3 million documents, about 50% of the documents in the possession of the DOJ have not been turned over. And you may remember back last year that there were reports that after Pam Bondi had told Donald Trump that he was in the Epstein files, that a lot of DOJ attorneys were assigned to go actually scrub the files of any mentions of Donald Trump. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but there were media reports to that extent. The fact that when we go in, Donald Trump's name is repeatedly redacted unnecessarily, that there appear to be not just a few, but like probably a lot of documents relating to Donald Trump that are not being produced to us. It all suggests a cover-up. And this is part of a bigger problem that under Pam Bondi, the entire Department of Justice has become so politicized. It looks like Donald Trump's law firm. And remember earlier last week, they put that giant banner with Donald Trump's mugshot over the Department of Justice. For a brief period, it looks like Donald Trump's hotel and not the Department of Justice, not the most powerful and important law enforcement agency in the world. This is supposed to be nonpartisan. It's supposed to apply the rule of law no matter where it goes. Instead, it looks like it's trying to protect Donald Trump and his closest allies.
You said it suggests a cover-up withholding these documents or not releasing these documents where a woman accused then citizen Donald Trump of wrongdoing. What action can you or might you take? What questions do you have that you might look into about why these documents were not released?
Well, we want to get all the documents. So first of all, we want to get all the Epstein files, and that is what the law requires. So the Massey Khanna bill that we passed last year, that Donald Trump signed into law under a lot of pressure. After he first called this a hoax, you may remember he signed the law. It requires them to turn over everything. And what we've seen is, again, 50%, 3 million documents have not been produced to us. So at this point, I think we need to keep pushing. Hopefully Chair Comer will try to assert congressional priorities. And also at this point, I think that Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, needs to go. She is not supposed to be Donald Trump's personal lawyer. She's going after his critics, whether it's people like Adam Schiff or Letitia James or James Comey. She is acting in ways that are unbecoming the office. I think she's breaking the law. And that is why I support her impeachment, because nothing else seems to be working at this point, and she needs to be gone from that office.
Congressman Dave Mint from California, appreciate your time this morning. Thank you.